right, without further ado, let's meet our virtual presenters today. Val Swisher, are you on the line today?
I sure am, Scott. Good morning. How are you?
It's so good to have you on the show. Nice to see you again. I haven't been able to chat with you for a while, and so I'm super excited to have you join us today. For members of our audience who might not know who you are and what you do, talk a little bit briefly about yourself and your connection to today's topic.
Sure. So I'm Val Swisher. I am the founder and CEO of Content Rules. We provide all types of content services from writing and editing and illustration through content strategy, moving to structured authoring, advice and information architecture and content models and taxonomy and metadata and all of those things.
Lovely. Well, we're going to touch on just some of those things today. I'm going to bring on your co-panelist today, Fabrice Lacroix, before we begin. Fabrice, are you on the line?
I am, Scott. Good morning.
Yes, welcome. Thank you for joining us later in your day and earlier in our morning. Where are you broadcasting from today?
I'm in France this week.
Oh,
lovely weather here.
Lovely. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself briefly and your connection to today's topic.
Sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of Free Topics, and Free Topics is the leading content delivery platform. So we're a SaaS solution, a software vendor. We have a SaaS solution which helps our customer transform the way they make the documentation available to their users. So we reinvent the way people can search, read, navigate, engage with your technical documentation. So we sort of moving you away from static content, documents, PDFs, and making content more dynamic and adapted to the device you're using for reading, to your situation. So it's like really reinventing how people leverage your investment in technical documentation and make that useful for their day-to-day job.
All right, without further ado, I'm going to welcome back to the stage, Val Swisher. Val, are you on the line still?
I'm still here, but I wish I was in France. I mean, everybody else is.
I think we should at least go next.
Goodness gracious.
Okay, before that, let's tell the audience a little bit about what this slide is. So I think my summary is you wrote a book with one of your compatriots at work about personalization, and you had this aha moment that there might be a paradox that's there. So tell us a little bit about the personalization paradox, and then we'll move on to why we're talking about it.
Absolutely. So yes, I wrote a book with Regina Preciado, who is one of my employees. And as you can see on the screen, it's called The Personalization Paradox: Why Companies Fail and How to Succeed at Delivering Personalized Experiences at Scale. And, we started by thinking about what is a personalized experience. And a personalized experience is when we can deliver the right content to the right person at the right time, on the right device, in the language of their choice. So we're giving that content consumer the content they need, where they are right now, looking at whatever or listening to whatever device they have in their hands. So we started with that type of definition. And as we were talking about it, we realized that in order to be able to deliver personalized experiences at scale, you need to be able to create what we call nimble, reusable pieces of content that can be combined in different ways on the fly for different people and different devices. To do this, you must standardize everything about the content. And I say this because when we think about scaling personalization, you could, and I've seen companies try, create different content for every situation. I've seen companies try to do this. And clearly, while it's personalized, it's very expensive to do, and it's very cumbersome to maintain, and it's really not scalable. And in the book, I compare it to building a custom home, where you get to pick every doorknob and every window and every whatever piece of molding, cabinet door, whatever. You get it, it's personalized, but it costs you a pretty penny, and you can't build a lot of them all at one time. So we realized that in order to be able to scale personalization, you need to be able to have a library of content that can be mixed and matched at that point of delivery. And in order to be successful doing that, you need to standardize the content. Because if you don't standardize the content and you try to mix and match these pieces of content, then while you might be able to produce an output, that output is not going to make sense to anybody. Your chances go way up that your output will hold together as a whole when you standardize everything about that content. So chunking that content into components that can be reused is important. And then when we talk about standardizing everything, we're talking about everything from the teeniest piece of content, which are the words we use, how we combine those words into sentences, so that's style and grammar, how we combine those sentences into paragraphs, how we combine paragraphs and create components, and the output types that we want to deliver. So that's the definition of everything in terms of what we've looked at in the book.
Excellent. Well, let me tell the audience that we got a nice little summary here. I'm going to end the slides, and now the audience will see all the panelists on the show. So welcome to you both. Welcome to Val and to Fabrice. Thanks for joining us. Fabrice, I know that you discovered this book maybe in much the same way I did. I learned that Val was working on this topic, and I thought, oh, yes, I want to know more about what she has to say. Tell us a little bit about your discovery of the book and what you learned.
Sure. Thing is that first you have to understand that we are always, as part of the requirement to be innovative and change the way people use TechDoc, we are always trying to look to the next thing. So we know that before platforms like Free Topics, users were struggling figuring out what was the right PDF to download, static content, and find the one that was applicable to what they wanted to achieve, whether it was what product, by product, by version, and figure out what the document they needed. It's like picking the right binder from the cabinet. So this has changed a bit, especially with platforms like Free Topics that do dynamic delivery. So we don't deliver document, we don't serve document, but fine-grained information that is highly tagged. And in that regard, particularly, you have facets, for example, right now, meaning that when you search, we make sure that you can filter out content based on criteria, such as this is the product I have, this is the version I have. So we can refine search result lists so that people make sure that people just see the info that is matching their situation. And again, in many cases, that is still a lot. I mean, even though people can filter out and refine their search, that most of the time remains a lot of info that they have to check and sift through to make sure they find what they need. So we are thinking since many time at what is the next step, because if you look at it particularly, and I think that's a good reference, if you go on Google, there's no facet, there's no filters on Google when you search. So, and still, we all know that if you run a search, I do run a search, Scott, you run a search, Val, we are on the same search now at the same time, we will all get different results. and probably we'll get results from Google that are adapted to who we are, based on what Google knows from us, learn from us. So, which for me is, for many people, the reference of what personalization means.
Right.
Means that you have your results, Val has our results, I have mine. So, and we are always trying to look at what does that mean, applying that to TechDoc, so that at some point people don't have to even click on facets. They don't have to even refine their search. They just say, this is what I need, and they get what they need.
Sure.
Which is a challenge. So then I heard about this book from Val, and I have it for real.
You have a copy.
Someone is talking about personalizing content, so I need to check what's in this book and how Val. And I know Val, and she's well known for being very smart, very acute, very knowledgeable on the subjects. I think, okay, I need to check what's her view on that matter. And I read the book, and I find it pretty amazing that it was well structured, how she could frame out all the impact on from writing to delivering. But, and that's a but, because otherwise we wouldn't be here today. Say, we need to discuss your book. There's a but in this. We need to discuss your book because you nailed everything right. But the point is that the example that you take is mostly around marketing content. And what we see most of the time is we see a lot of people talking about personalizing the content experience in a marketing situation when it's about generic content, like e-commerce website pushing the products to you, or on a media website, or even social networks now to manage that you get content that is part of your, which is a prime as well, part of your inner circle of interest. So this is what we have in mind, and I say, okay, that worked for marketing content, but here it's TechDoc. So even though I fully agree, I buy everything you wrote in that book, at some point say, how would that work on TechDoc? Can we apply the same thing? And for me, then came the idea that, in fact, maybe the title may not be fully applicable to TechDoc, because in the case of TechDoc, what we need is not personalized content. It's contextual content, maybe, because for me, at some point, what matters is not who the person is, but what is the task that person has to achieve, which in some way is not the opposite, but is a bit different from personalizing content. It's not about me. It's about what I have to do. It's mostly about the machine I have in front of me if I am a field technician. So it's personalizing for the machine, not for the user. And that becomes a bit different.
Would that context also include things like situational?
Yeah, that's it. Situational, what machine, what task. At some point, maybe my skills, if I've been certified to do some few things, but is it still personalizing content when we are considering that the content to be delivered is about the situation and not the person itself?
Yeah.
So is it situational content or personalized content?
Val, what do you think?
Where should I begin? First of all, let me say thank you to Fabrice for this conversation, because and Scott's got, oh my gosh, look at all those copies. Where's mine? Thank you, because I think challenging some of these ideas is really important. We shouldn't just read it and take it as, gospel. So I think the first thing, I have so many things to say about this. We are accustomed to marketeers trying to personalize content for us. I mean, just, it's the Amazon experience, right? When I log into Amazon, embarrassed to say, over time, I bought so much stuff from Amazon that, they're going to show me the shoes I need. It's not that I want them, I need them. They know enough about me. I agree with you that way more has been done in the marketing arena around personalization than in the technical arena. And I also agree that we need to do a better job in the technical arena of personalizing content. Where I would like to start is with the term search. In my mind, to my liking, personalization, when done, I'm going to say perfectly, but of course nothing's perfect. I don't actually have to search because you already know enough about me that you just serve up what I need. And that could be technical instructions. It could be, depending upon what I'm, whose website I'm looking at, where I am. It could be conceptual information. And I think that we certainly can talk about personalizing content for the context, but I think we need to do better than that. And and we can discuss this, but I make a whole point of how much I hate personas. I hate personas. Mm-hmm. I just hate personas. And why? And why I think that whole paradigm doesn't make sense. And so when I hear context, I think persona, and I think stereotype, and I think,
I see where you're going. Well, it makes sense. I mean, we have to be sensitive to not over grouping people into generic buckets and then assuming that we're somehow giving them value. For example, Fabrice and I could be in the same bucket, but be in different areas of the same bucket because we have some similarities, but enough differences that the content we would give to the bucket full of people might not be appropriate for both Fabrice and I in the way that he's suggesting. And I think that the context is the key here, right? Like how maybe contextualization is part of personalization. That just dawned on me. I didn't think that through. So I have no idea whether that's a valuable statement or not, but it seems like, intellectually speaking, that bringing contextually relevant information is part of personalization because if you gave information
more limited
not relevant,
view on something that is more global and more complex.
Yeah.
Okay. We can see it that way then. And then the question is, maybe for Tech Doc, we should at least start looking at contextual content as a step to personalized content. And I agree that at some point, personalization is not only about the context, but it's almost sort of try to guess what you need as well based on what you achieve. You have to achieve right now. And I like
it this way. What if you're a brand new employee at a company that has the ability to deliver some kind of segmented information to people, and they've identified specific things that new people struggle with because you're brand new, right? And so you can't possibly know something that everybody else knows because you don't have that knowledge yet. So maybe we could start by focusing on some context. Who is this person in the bucket? Where are they at in the life cycle of their learning? What is typically needed in this particular phase? And what would be less likely to be needed would be the extra content that's still available. Like you could still find it if you needed it, but we wouldn't serve it up to a brand new person. And you wouldn't automatically skip to university classes if they hadn't been to elementary school. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe that's where we start. What do you think about
it? I think what you just say here reminds me of a discussion I had 3 weeks ago at Nordic TCOM with a customer of us. And that was about, and exactly what you mentioned here. It's about progressive disclosure. That's like, I mean, like there's a task something to be done on the machine. Okay. So you have to service that device for whatever reason. The thing is that what you want to see on your screen probably is different if you have been doing the same, if you've been working in the domain for 20 years, and if you're just being onboarded 6 months ago. See what I mean? Because you wouldn't, that's probably the same, but you would hide some parts that are obvious to someone because you've done that 23 times before. And you don't want to have this, to scroll 20 pages, just having some drawings on how to remove some screws and remove that part before accessing what needs to be serviced, because you know that you've done that 20 times, as opposed to someone that is new and probably needs to be the first few times need to be instructed on how to achieve something, but you still need the task list to be displayed. What I mean, it's not like because you've done it 20 times that you don't need anything. So it's like, those are the key elements that you should remember to do step by step without the details, but still at some point, if you don't remind, because in fact, the last time you did it was 6 months ago, you can click and say, show me more. You see what I mean? It's more like, it's not only about the search as well, it's about disclosing the amount of content for the same thing, and then that become personalization. So I'm also contradicting myself now, because that becomes very depending on the person itself, not the context, because then it reflects on who I am and my skills and my knowledge and how easy it is for me to achieve that task, or if I need more details. What I mean, that could be a way of seeing this idea of personalizing content, disclosing more or less of that content based on how confident I am with achieving this, or if I need at some point, show me how to do that because I don't remember. So
Val,
it could be.
I like that idea. Val, I want to throw this in before you comment. One of our viewers commented that this a question, isn't a person's experience level a facet of personalization that would be relevant for technical documentation professionals to consider? For example, a beginner needs more conceptual information usually and all the basic information, but maybe advanced people need a lot less. I don't know. What do you think, Val? Where are we going with this?
Yeah, so absolutely. So that's kind of the point. The point is, if I'm a beginner, then don't forget to show me the definition of the word torque. If we're installing something and I need to screw something in at a certain torque. If I'm more advanced, don't waste my time giving me the definition of torque, because I've been working with, torque for 20 years. I think the key is, I've got Sally and I have Sam, and they're both employees, and they're both new employees. Sally happens to know a lot about torque and Sam doesn't. So what information do I need to collect and know about Sally and Sam so that when they come into the, intro to racking the widget in the rack, mounting the widget in the rack documentation or course or whatever, I'm giving Sally just those details she needs, and I'm giving Sam the details plus that extra definition, background context that he needs. So how do I serve that to them without making them search through it, without making Sally scroll past, 3 pages about torque and how to apply torque and how to measure torque and all this stuff, and give that information to Sam because the torque is very important? How do I do that?
I apologize. I'm going to cough. Give me 1 second. I wonder if Val, I see where you're going with that, and I'm anxious to know what Fabrice thinks about that as well. But I wonder if also there's a discussion to be had about whether or not we should be using psychic power to determine what we believe people might need, or should we be allowing them to select what they need or not? So let's say that they both land on the topic for the torque. I don't know enough about torque to be intelligent to speak about that, but let's just say whatever torque is, they're on the page. And there's a step-by-step instruction, but there are next to each one, there's a little bit of an extra bit of information that can be discovered if you touch it, if you tap on it, click on it, hover over it, use your voice, whatever it is, that will tell you more. So you say, oh, I know what torque is. I'm going to step number 3, and you start doing the task. But maybe the progressive disclosure is a choice that we offer to the user. So we tell them only what they need to know, and then there's additional information that they can touch and it will show. Maybe that's also a form of personalizing the experience. It doesn't have to be done in advance.
Probably now that we have this discussion, I read initially the idea of personalizing content by a bit more like when you do with e-commerce. It's yes or no. You show the entire content, or you remove the piece of content, or you include the piece of content. And probably now that we have this discussion, personalizing tech doc is not about removing. It's not yes or no that piece of content goes into the content or not. It's more like, for that same piece of content, which is step 2 of the task, how much of that content should I display initially or make available on demand? So you see that there's a bit different. Like, instead of thinking about content as a yes or no, a component is part of or is removed from, which is black and white, which is 0, 1, and which is dangerous with tech dog, because you cannot remove a step from a task, assuming that the guy is an expert, so you don't need to list the first steps. You need to list the steps. Now, it's not about yes or no, it's more like it's about the how much of it should I show, which then sheds a new light for me on this idea of personalizing content. More how much of content. And again, back on what you said, Scott, then it's also can the system learns enough about you so that automatically at some point it starts hiding a bit of that content without having me to start hiding manually what I don't need. You see what I mean? It's like, can the system say, oh my God, this you've read 4 times, and I assume that, and based on you scroll rapidly as well, or you have edited the last time. So I've learned how you behaved on that content the last, or so that now I can by default I did, but you still can display it if you want.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So how can system be more smart at this progressive disclosure is learned by the system and adapts over time so that it becomes more natural to people?
That is brilliant.
That is brilliant.
That is brilliant. I mean, really, that is brilliant. So think about it also in terms of machine learning. So the machine is learning what it's taught you. I've taught you about torque. You've read this section 4 times. So I'm not going to remove it. I'm just going to make the caret, you can click and drop down or whatever navigation you want.
So you minimize it, right?
Minimize it. So that's the right word. But this is brilliant. And this is a really interesting way to bring machine learning into the picture, because it can keep track and it can figure out all the things you know or you should know.
Yeah.
And then present to you personalized content. Deliver that personalized content.
I wonder if we could copy or learn lessons from form developers. I don't mean the ones that we all hate, but the forms that are smart. Like sometimes you'll fill out a form and then you'll try to go backwards, like, oh, wait a minute, I changed my mind. And they may or may not have in their design process, they may not have a plan for that. So you might just hit the back button right on your browser to go backwards, because the browser allows you to do that, even if the app doesn't expect it. But then the form says, wait a minute, you've already submitted the blah, blah, blah information. Are you sure you want to do this again? Maybe there's some kind of logic we could build in that says, hey, like we normally show you the procedure, the video, and then some other things, but we've noticed that you skip over those other things. Would you just like us to minimize those in the future? Maybe it's a preference you could even set, like show me the full picture of the information package. Every information package it's a topic, it gets a procedure, gets a video, gets extra vocabulary links and some other things. Maybe because we componentize those, we can eventually train the viewers of our content to tell us in their profile which of those things are most valuable to their experience. And then we would show those more often based on their answers. That might even be a way to start doing it without divining it, if that makes any sense.
We've seen even years ago companies with platforms. I'm thinking about a company that, Scott, you and I know very well, that has a site for how to repair, iPhones, for example, and you can rate the different articles.
Yeah.
And I think I think what you're talking about is somewhere in that space with this was helpful, that wasn't helpful, that sort of thing.
I guess what I was thinking about was that the act of filtering or trying to serve up the right information at the right time in the right format in the right language wherever that person needs it is filled with a bunch of decision points. And some of them are based on things that we glean from human behavior. Some are things we look at a specific person and we say, oh, we know they bought this product from us, and we know they're a manager, and we know they say they speak French. So we have facts about them that we can use. But then we can ask, right? And so when you ask, what do you prefer? You have these choices. It's like your email list. If you said I cover 5 different topics and you just subscribe to my email list, which topic would you like to most receive information about? Because I have so many topics. I don't want to overwhelm you. I want to give you context, and you tell me what you're interested in. I'll deliver what you're interested in. Maybe there's this two-way relationship between the act of personalizing and the value it brings to the end user based on how fine-tuned we can get those data.
So I really want to respond to that because that's really important. So there's the whole topic and category of how do we get information about you so that we can serve up the right content to you.
Sure.
And then there's the mechanism of serving up that content. My experience and my thought is we're getting better and better at asking the questions and following who you are and what you do and what you've bought and what you've clicked and all those things than we are at personalizing the content we give you. And we can, right? I mean, those are two different things. And the third part of that, which really is a little bit more in the details of the book, is what do we need to do to the content so that when we have that mechanism that is able to select based on either what you told us about yourself or what we have gleaned, that content makes sense, that content flows.
It aligns, right? It needs to align with your expectations.
That's a great word. Great word.
Okay.
Fabrice, tell us what you think about that.
I think that's okay. I think it sheds a new light on the subjects for me. The personalization may not be, again, as I said, not like the fact that you include or remove piece of content as you would do in e-commerce, like you propose or don't propose a specific product or that model of shoes. It's more like the content needs to be here because it's tech doc. So it's more like making sure the content applies to the machine, and as well, how much of that content do I show you, and making sure we can learn dynamically about how people engage, behave with content. So can we that dynamically adapt how much of that content we disclose, but still keep the content here so that people can expand something and still access the details of something. So that's getting clear to me now what personalization would be on TechDoc. It's not 0-1, it's how much of that. So I get a point. But I have another question.
Yes, go ahead.
I have another question. So, and I agree with the fact, and I like the fact that you nailed the fact that if you want to do it at scale, you have to normalize content from words, tone, sentences, paragraphs, components. Here, I fully agree. And then you say, but to make that work, then you need to centralize the place where you manage that content. You need one tool. It's like one tool is necessary, because if you don't have that one CCMS, because it becomes component based, so you need a CCMS, and if you don't have the CCMS, that won't work. So I understand the problem, the idea, but what we see on our side with working with our customers is that at the same time, they are trying to have more and more people involved in the process of creating content, because everything goes faster. You have to roll out product faster. It's changing every day. There are software in every machine now. So it's every week something new. So you can't, it's not like one version per year.
Right.
So it's every day, every week at most. And for that, and we see that internally or with our customers, they have developers, subject matter experts, lots of people engaged and onboarded in producing that content. The thing is that you cannot ask a developer to work in a CCMS. They will work with their favorite tool. And if you want them to produce knowledge on how to work with those APIs, they're going to write that in Markdown and store that in GitHub. And probably as well, then you will have subject matter experts working in Word or in a wiki somewhere. And you can't ask people to work on component, being content architects and all that. So my question is, how do you make that work? This idea of we need to centralize the content management, the content writing, considering in fact that in some way, because all those companies need to be faster with more people involved in the process. In fact, they multiplies the tool they use. What we see is that there are more and more tools.
More tools, yeah.
And not less. So what you ask for makes sense, but that's exactly the opposite that we see on the field. So I think here there's a conundrum for companies. Say, what should we do? Should we do as in the book and ask everyone to work in the CCMS, which for me is doomed to fail, or how can we apply content normalization, considering there will be 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 data sources anyway?
Yeah. Val, what do you think about that?
It's very interesting because since writing the book, so, the book was published in 2021 and it was written in 2020 during COVID, I've had a lot of thoughts about this topic, about content silos. And what are we going to do about this? Because the silos, as you just said, Fabrice, they're not going away. And there really is no perfect tool that we can all write in. There really isn't. And as you say, departments need to move fast and they need to think about their own needs. And, there's no time for us to all jump on a single CCMS. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'm glad you brought it up because I've been doing this for a really long time now. And for as long as I've been doing this, for 30 years, we've always been saying, we need to break the content silos. We need to break the content silos. And you know what? 30 years later, we're not going to break the content silos. I think what you just said is absolutely right. It's not going to happen. So what can we do? How can we solve this? And, from a tools perspective and also from a content perspective. So I think if we look at the content perspective, if I'm going to have a variety of content in a variety of tools written by a variety of people, even in a variety of departments, and I want to create a personalized experience, which is going to pull this piece from over here and this piece from over here and this piece from over here and magically put them together and deliver them. From a content perspective, we all better use the same words and we all better use the same tense. You can't be in the past tense and you in the future tense and me in the present tense and put it all together and we don't know if we're coming or going.
Not unless you want to have a lot of calls to support.
Right? I think the content piece is easier because we know how to fix it. We know how to fix that. People don't do it, but theoretically we know. Then there's the delivery mechanism. Then there's getting that tool that can pull, I can't imagine what tool that might be, that can pull content from different places and put it all together and deliver it. So I think that standardization becomes even more critical when I'm not centralizing my content, when I can't run a spell checker across the whole corpus, whatever.
So we
fully agree. Then we fully agree on the fact that probably unifying the authoring tool like a CMS may not be the go-to solution, and silos won't go away. So then solutions like free topics are even more important and make sense. But that reinforces the fact that you have to normalize the way people are writing in those different silos, which means that you have to train people. You have to make sure that your guidelines, your writing rules are consistent across the teams. If it's not, because anyway, even though if you put a one CCMS and people are not trained at writing the same way, that won't work anyway. So, but it's still a bit more effort to make that normalization happen across the different tools, because people are scattered.
Can I take you toward the place where I think we're heading, which is the question that I would ask is, should we be personalizing when we write the content or when we deliver the content? And what are the pros and cons of doing that at delivery versus putting the onus on the author? I think part of this challenge with where people are willing to work and what tools that they're most comfortable with, and whether or not they'll follow our instructions when we say let's bust the silos, is related to the user of the tool's perception of ease of use, usability, and what's in it for them. And as long as they have some kind of notion in their head that it's not, making them happy, right, and bringing joy to them, and like getting rid of all the tasks that they hate, we have to decide, how do we help them give the best customer experience to the content consumer with as least friction on their part? And if delivery is actually where the magic occurs, that's what I'm kind of hearing you two dance around. Am I right about that? That should we be focusing on the delivery portion as where the value comes?
Two questions in your question. The first one was, can we make that happen, the normalization, at the delivery instead of at the writing time?
Yeah.
I'm not sure we can. I mean, I wouldn't bet on that. I mean, technologically speaking, and we have to consider that it's tech doc. In some cases, tech doc is for, I don't know, calibrating a medical device, and there'll be lives at stake. I mean, you cannot play around with the content and say, okay, we will normalize on the fly. I mean, it has to be controlled. It has to be certified. It has to be accurate. So you cannot play around with the content on the fly like that, at least in many situations. And probably for companies, the risk would be too important to manage. See what I mean?
What about the practicality of doing it, though? If it's not practical to assume that everyone's going to use the same everything all the time the way we want them to, but we standardize the objects and we standardize our taxonomy and we make rules that can be tweaked at the end, isn't it better to make the rules if you see this content under this situation, deliver that content? So it seems like the rules should be at the end, not when the writer's thinking about translating the SME's words into some better language. Instead, we should say, make the best explanation, product description, process, whatever it is that you can, in accordance with our company's standards. And then at the end, because we've standardized everything, we're going to say to the computer, when you see this thing that's standardized, it's okay to serve it up over here under these rules. So do the rules come in at delivery instead of making the authors try to figure out where the content's supposed to be going?
Probably normalizing and applying taxonomies at scale is easier than the vocabulary, the writing part. By writing, I mean words, tone, sentence, phrases, paragraphs, which is the core of the content. This part is tricky to align on the fly, done by the machine. You see what I mean? Because the risk that the content get tempered is still too important. Now, if you don't touch the content and you just consider that the technology is good enough for tagging content and making sure that you figure out which parts can go with which part of content, then yes, technology is good enough for that. But again, here, that's another subject, but that's very interesting because it means that the taxonomy you design will have to be applied at the corporate level. While if you have one tool, you can design them and make them exist in the CCMS. While here, you have to design them outside of the CCMS and try to project them or make sure that people get a sense of those enterprise-wide taxonomies on every tool, even though at the end, the alignment of the taxonomy values can be done by Free Topics, which we do, but still we need some metadata initially or something that is. So there's a bit of complexity here, and probably Val has more experience than we have because that's exactly what she does every day, helping companies design this taxonomy at scale and knowing where they should be applied and by whom.
Val, I think you have thought about this at the delivery point. What's your argument for when we would focus on the delivery phase as the critical part of the life cycle when we want to direct the content to where it needs to go?
Okay, so here's my thoughts. My thoughts are, in order to be able to deliver personalized content at scale, we need to be able to use small chunks of content, and at the point of delivery, pull the correct chunks of content and put them in the correct order to create that output that is then delivered. In order to do this, you have to have what Fabrice just said, a corporate taxonomy, especially if you're in a multitude of places where you're storing your content, a multitude of repositories. We need to have a standardized taxonomy and metadata. The tags need to be consistent so that the machines can actually find the pieces of content that they need that are appropriate. The taxonomy becomes more critical than ever before because it's the taxonomy that's determining, that's choosing what components to pull. So the taxonomy has to be standard so I can pull from all these different places. The terminology has to be standard so that I'm calling, the widget by the same name every time. The style and tone and grammar has to be standard so that I'm not coming and going. All of these things need to be standardized so that each component can live on its own. It each has its own shelf life, and it's the point of delivery, in my opinion, that does the magic, that does the pulling, that looks at the criteria. Oh, this is Sam. Sam joined us here. He's been here this long. He's gone through these things, whatever those criteria are, to pull. What I don't know that we have is that mechanism. Do we have a mechanism that can say, here are all the things I know about Sam, and based on the fact that Sam is about to put the widget in the rack, I'm going to give him this, and this. But these pieces, I'm going to either not give him or minimize, however we decide to do that. I don't know if that technology exists.
Well, maybe this is the learning curve that we're at right now. We have practitioners who were experimenting with technology, trying to make it do better work, right? Better customer experiences. Then we have people trying to establish best practices and learning lessons from those experiments. Then we have people like Val who are documenting what those experiments led to and learning and what they believe might be the path forward in the future. And then we have what we're doing now, which is scrutinizing that path to see where are those rules and guidances and suggestions appropriate and where might we tweak them, ditch them, whatever, when we're not right. Because I think that's part of the science experiment, right? Is that we learn and then we iterate and we improve. And technical writers are working in teams of people that do that all day long with their code. Why shouldn't our content also mature and become better and more informed? Do you both agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, then let's take a couple questions from the audience. So one person in our audience wants to know, do you think we can learn someone's familiarity with the content by looking at their previous reading history? And then they comment that, and if we had progressive disclosure, could we see if and when they were reading the simple versus the complex content in your view?
I think that's the one we discussed when I say the machine should learn about, and automatically start hiding more content as we see that people are getting accustomed to having read that part of the content. So yeah, definitely that's how it should work in a perfect world.
Do we make the argument, though, also that we throw in a little neuroscience here and we say we know from neuroscience studies that people do not read, so that while we may believe they're reading something, it's akin to them saying, I was watching that television station during the 9 o'clock hour on Tuesday. We know they said they were watching, but we don't know what they saw and what they didn't see and what they didn't understand. So we won't know that from the reading scores. But what if we talked about probability? We said that more than likely 9 out of 10 times Dan clicks on the progressive disclosure link and looks at the extra stuff. So 9 out of 10 times he does that. Let's assume that this is something he likes to do until he tells us otherwise, either through not doing that anymore or declaring it in their profile when we ask them. I think it's a combination, right? We have to learn. Right now, we don't have a magic way to learn about them.
Interesting. I think you're bringing up predictive and prescriptive analysis in AI.
Sure.
So, predictive analysis is when you take as much data as you can and you look at it, and then you predict what this person is going to do next or what they need next or whatever. And then prescriptive takes that a step further to say, oh, based on everything I'm seeing, this is what the person needs next. So you're prescribing it rather than trying to predict it. They're very similar, but there is a slight difference between them.
I agree. I think that's definitely a show for the future where we talk about those possibilities and how do we enable them. But before we do, can we leave the audience with a little bit of value? So there's a great question in here. I'm going to rephrase it so that we can answer it with some tips. So this person has a scenario they proposed. So one of our viewers said, hey, pretend you have thousands of pages of technical documentation, mostly on software products, and that software runs on some specific product, some hardware. The information is organized by taxonomy, and the customers use the products together, different combinations of the products depending on what they need to do. So the information is delivered over a big corporate website. How would we apply personalization? What types of personalization they would like to know? Would we be personalizing by role? Would that be an option? How about by product combinations? How about frequency of the tasks that are performed with those products? The level of understanding of the user? So there's 4 really good ideas right there, right? Role, product combinations, frequently used tasks, and level of understanding. Are there any other things you can think of that would help a software company deliver a more relevant, individualized experience?
Probably past readings.
So past behavior.
Yeah, past behavior would be past readings. What are the subject previously read, and what, if you look at the path and the journey of other users that have a similar journey across the content, can that help you figure out what would be interesting next for that user as well? So that's where machine learning, that's not something that you can design by yourself. It's more something that is created by the machine learning part of it. So mining all the user journey across the content, when you have gathered enough of them, and you can probably have patterns that stand out, and then you can reinject those patterns to say, okay, this is probably, if you have this combination of product and you're trying to achieve that.
What about a more basic level, though? Yeah. Assuming they don't have machine learning capabilities, what could they do with their taxonomy? Because that was their argument.
What taxonomy,
right, against different systems, all using the shared vocabulary now. What can we do because we're using the same terminology? We can do role, we can do language, we can do product, we can do versions, we can do level of understanding, level of complexity. I mean, that means that we have to assign a level of complexity, right? Which is a whole nother thing altogether. But can you think of anything else that your customers are doing that would be another kind of individualization that would be possible with the taxonomy?
What I would say is, in the ideal world, you apply all of them. All of them are applied. And what I would recommend as a start in terms of trying to figure, how do we peel this onion, is to make a matrix that is a big undertaking, but make a matrix of the, whether it's the combinations and then the roles and the product combinations and the tasks and all of that, so that you can start honing in on those combinations that are most frequent. Because with the technology we have today and what we have today, we may not be able to address all of these are great. We may not be able to address all of them, including what Fabrice just said, which is what's the experience that they've already had, if you can get that. So we need all of this information. The taxonomy needs to reflect all of this information. And the more information we can gather about the person who needs this content, the better results we can get in matching.
And let me throw in a couple extra words into what you just said. So I want to rephrase the more that we know about the person, and then add for Fabrice's suggestion and the context in which they find themselves trying to obtain that information. Yep. Can help us provide some individualized experiences of value. I love it that you were able to talk about these things in the way that we have today. I think it's great for our industry to be able to do these things and pick apart these ideas. I think well-intentioned consultants and information development professionals put their ideas down to share with others. And sometimes we're going to have to learn why our ideas weren't 100% accurate, or maybe they could be improved right over time. So thank you both for doing that. For our audience members, thanks for joining us today. Let me tell you that I'm happy that you're here. Thanks for joining us for a Content Wrangler webinar series. Thanks for all the questions that we got. Lots of them. We couldn't get to all of them. I apologize for that. Thanks to Val and Fabrice for joining us. And thanks to Fluid Topics, our sponsor of today's show. Fluid Topics helps companies around the world provide engaging user experiences by bringing all of the product technical documentation content together in one place, whatever the sources and formats, into a single smart product knowledge hub. Fluid Topics content delivery platform delivers unified content to all of your channels, from your websites to support desks, from documentation portals, even to chatbots. If you'd like Fluid Topics to help you create engaging, personalized user experiences that boost production and customer success and also improve your operational efficiency, you can check them out on the web and learn more about how you can get a demonstration and have a chat with the representatives from Fluid Topics. And you can do so by checking them out on the web at fluidtopics.com, or look in the attachments section of your webinar viewing panel, where you can find a link to the materials provided by Fluid Topics. Also, don't forget, tomorrow, joining us for creating great looking PDFs from XML Dita with the folks from Maramo PDF. I look forward to that show and hope that you'll join me for that as well tomorrow. You've been watching Breaking Free from One Size Fits All Documentation, a discussion with Fabrice Lacroix and Val Swisher on delivering personalized documentation content experiences and how we may or may not get there. I hope that you've learned some things today. Thanks for sharing and answering all the questions. Please give us a rating on the way out the door using our 1 through 5-star rating system. Until we see you at another webinar in the future, be well, be safe, and keep doing great work. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thanks, Val. Thanks, Scott. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.